What if I told you that your deepest longing, the one you rarely admit to anyone, might be the very thing keeping you from freedom? Not money, not power, not even love, but the quiet, aching desire to be understood. We all feel it. You explain your point of view and their eyes glaze over. You share your pain and someone says, "I get it," but you can feel they don't. You try again, carefully, artfully, offering more words, more stories, more pieces of yourself, and for a moment, when they finally nod in resonance, you feel relief, safety, belonging. But here is the paradox. The more you depend on being understood, the more power you give away. You start shaping your words not for truth, but for approval. You start curating your personality not for authenticity, but for acceptance. And without noticing, you are no longer speaking from the depths of your being. You are performing for an imagined audience that may never fully see you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them knows anything about the subject. Yet we behave as if the opinion of 10,000 strangers is worth more than our own judgment." Why? Because to be understood feels like safety, and safety is one of the oldest human cravings in our evolutionary code. A child who is misunderstood by the tribe risks neglect, exile, or worse. For hundreds of thousands of years, survival meant belonging, and belonging meant being seen, heard, and interpreted in ways that assured the tribe. This one is one of us. That instinct has not faded, it has merely been dressed in modern clothing. Office politics, romantic relationships, online arguments, social media posts. The primitive brain still whispers, "If they understand me, I am safe. If they don't, I am in danger." But here is where the trap begins to close. If understanding equals safety, then misunderstanding feels like a threat. Not just a social inconvenience, but a kind of existential wound. When someone misreads our intentions, disagrees with our view, or distorts our story, we feel a primal panic and our minds rush to correct the narrative, to win them over, to make them get it. We rarely ask whether their understanding is actually necessary. We rarely stop to consider whether our peace should depend on the shape of their perception. Carl Jung warned about this dependency when he spoke of the persona, the mask we wear in society. The mask is not evil in itself, it helps us navigate the social world. But when we mistake the mask for the self, when we live only to maintain the image others can accept, we imprison ourselves in the shallowest version of our own being. We become trapped not by malice, but by an endless performance for the sake of comprehension. The danger is subtle. At first it feels like connection. Finally, someone sees me. But slowly it becomes compulsion. I must make them see me. And soon it becomes bondage. If they don't see me, I am not safe. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this as the slow death of individuality. To him, the herd seeks comfort in shared understanding, while the free spirit learns to stand in the storm of being misunderstood. The individual, he wrote, has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. Yet in our age of constant connection, the tribe is everywhere. In our pockets, on our screens, in the comment sections. And here's the problem, the tribe's understanding is never whole. It is filtered through their own fears, projections, and desires. Even when they get you, what they understand is often not you, but a reflection of themselves painted over your words. So we end up trapped in a hall of mirrors, explaining ourselves to reflections that distort us. The more we speak, the more the image bends. The more the image bends, the more desperate we become to fix it. And the more desperate we become, the less authentic we are. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Hell is other people." But he did not mean that people are inherently hellish. He meant that when our sense of self is trapped in the gaze of others, we are never free. We exist only as they see us. This is why the desire to be understood is so dangerous. It feels like the path to connection, but often it is the slow erosion of independence. It invites us to anchor our identity in waters we do not control. So before we go deeper, I want to ask you the question that will guide the rest of this journey. If no one fully understood you, not your partner, not your friends, not your family, could you still feel whole? If the answer is no, what you are about to discover might be uncomfortable, because the next step is to see exactly how that craving for understanding is shaped, reinforced, and exploited, and why the only reliable escape lies not in being understood, but in learning to understand yourself first. The ancient philosophers did not live in an age of Instagram stories or comment sections, but they knew the intoxication of approval and the sting of misunderstanding. They saw how quickly the need to be recognized could bend a person's soul toward compromise. Plato, in his allegory of the cave, tells the story of prisoners chained in darkness, watching shadows on a wall. For them, the shadows are reality. If one prisoner escapes and sees the world outside, he faces a problem when he returns to share the truth. The others, still chained, do not understand him. In fact, they resent him. The parable is often told as a lesson about truth and ignorance, but it also whispers another truth. When you live for the understanding of those still in the cave, you will shape your words to match their shadows. And in doing so, you may dim your own light. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic, carried the weight of an empire, yet wrote to himself in Meditations, "Ambition means tying your well-being to what others say or do. Sanity means tying it to your own actions." For Marcus, the goal was not to erase connection with others, but to anchor one's peace in self-governance. He understood that the human desire for approval is natural, but if it becomes a ruler instead of a servant, it distorts our judgment. Centuries later, Michel de Montaigne, the French essayist, would admit with disarming honesty that he often found himself seeking the esteem of others only to feel emptier when he obtained it. "The greatest thing in the world," he wrote, "is to know how to belong to oneself." His essays are full of reminders that even the wisest are not immune to this trap, and that the work of philosophy is often the work of unhooking our hearts from the need to be perfectly understood. Then came Friedrich Nietzsche, who spoke with the sharp edge of one who had already walked far from the herd. Nietzsche saw the craving to be understood as part of the slave morality, a morality that values safety, sameness, and validation over truth and greatness. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he has his prophet declare, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. The dancing star cannot be explained to the herd, it is lived, not justified." For Nietzsche, greatness often meant accepting the loneliness of being misunderstood. Carl Jung brought the conversation into the language of psychology. He introduced the idea of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming fully oneself, integrating both the conscious persona and the shadow. Individuation requires courage to step beyond the versions of yourself that others can comfortably accept. Jung warned that the more tightly we cling to the persona, the mask we show the world, the more alienated we become from our inner life. And the persona thrives on being understood, because it is built for the gaze of others. Even Sigmund Freud, though more concerned with the unconscious drives of sexuality and aggression, understood the need for recognition as a powerful motivator. He observed how children seek validation from parents, and how this early conditioning shapes adult relationships. When a child's sense of safety is tied to being correctly interpreted by the parent, that pattern can carry forward into adulthood, leaving the grown man or woman still anxiously scanning faces for signs of approval. In the 20th century, the humanistic psychologists reframed the idea of understanding. Carl Rogers spoke of unconditional positive regard, the deep healing that comes from being accepted without precondition. Rogers did not dismiss the need to be understood. He saw it as a basic human nutrient. But even he warned that true growth requires self-acceptance to accompany external validation. Without it, we become dependent on others for permission to exist. The thread through all these perspectives is this: Plato warns that truth will not always be understood by those around you. Aurelius reminds you to tie your peace to your own actions, not others' perceptions. Montaigne admits the pull of approval, but points toward belonging to oneself. Nietzsche urges you to embrace the solitude of the misunderstood. Jung shows how the mask we wear for understanding can suffocate the soul. Freud traces the dependency back to childhood. Rogers balances the value of understanding with the necessity of self-correction. Seen in this light, the craving to be understood is not evil in itself. It has built communities, fostered empathy, and made possible the great works of art, philosophy, and love. But it also has a shadow side, one that philosophers and psychologists alike have warned against. The way it can turn into servitude to the opinions of others. The most dangerous aspect is that it feels noble. Who would argue against wanting to be understood? It sounds like the foundation of connection. But we must examine not only the beauty of the flower, but the soil in which it grows. And often, that soil is laced with fear. By now, we've seen that the desire to be understood has ancient roots, and that the greatest minds have warned against letting it govern us. But to truly free ourselves from its grip, we need to step inside the machinery of the mind and see how this craving operates from within. The first thing to understand is that our brains are prediction engines. Every social interaction is a small gamble. Will they receive me as I am? When the answer seems to be yes, we feel validated. When it's no, our nervous system reacts as if a small alarm has been triggered. This is not metaphor. Neuroscience has shown that social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain. The craving for understanding, then, is not just a preference. It is wired into the circuitry of survival. One of the first traps in this machinery is the distortion psychologists call mind reading. The assumption that we know what others are thinking. If their tone is sharp, we assume they are against us. If they are silent, we imagine they have judged us wrongly. These imagined readings push us into defensive explanation or desperate clarification, often without any evidence that we were misunderstood in the first place. Then there is personalization, the tendency to interpret any misunderstanding as a direct reflection on our worth. If someone disagrees with our view, it feels like they are rejecting us rather than simply challenging an idea. And then there is overgeneralization, where one instance of misunderstanding becomes a universal law. They didn't get me turns into I am ungettable. Cognitive behavioral theory has long studied these distortions. Aaron Beck observed that the human mind has a bias toward confirming its existing beliefs, even when those beliefs cause suffering. When you believe you must be understood to be safe, you will unconsciously seek and notice only the evidence that confirms your misunderstood identity. Beneath these distortions often lies an emotional blueprint formed in childhood. John Bowlby's attachment theory showed how children develop internal models of relationships based on their caregivers' responses. In secure attachment, the child feels safe even when not perfectly understood because the caregiver's love is consistent. In anxious attachment, the child learns that love feels conditional, so they become hypervigilant for signs of being gotten or not gotten. In avoidant attachment, the child learns to suppress their needs for understanding, yet still feels the ache for it beneath the surface. By adulthood, these patterns play out in subtle but powerful ways. An anxiously attached person may over-explain themselves in every interaction, desperate to erase any gap in comprehension. An avoidantly attached person might pretend they don't care about being understood, yet feel wounded when they are misread. In both cases, the locus of safety is outside the self, and as long as understanding is an external currency, it must be constantly earned in a marketplace that is fickle and unstable. Edward Deci and Richard Ryan's self-determination theory identifies three core psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. The desire to be understood falls under relatedness, the sense of belonging and mutual recognition. But here's the twist. When relatedness is pursued without autonomy, it breeds dependency. In healthy growth, it wraps around a sturdy inner pillar, your autonomy, and climbs higher. Without that pillar, it sprawls across the ground, vulnerable to every footstep. Seeking understanding without grounding in self-commission is like growing that vine without support. We see this invisible cage play out in the lives of artists, lovers, and leaders. The artist creates from the depths of their soul, but after one exhibition where critics don't get the work, they begin to paint with the critic in mind, not the muse. The art becomes easier to understand, perhaps more popular, but the painter feels hollow. The lover feels constantly misunderstood and spends hours crafting the perfect explanation until the relationship becomes a theater of managed perception rather than genuine connection. The leader with a bold vision faces resistance and begins to dilute their message to make it clearer, only to watch the original transformative power vanish in compromise. Leon Festinger's research on cognitive dissonance explains why this trap is so persistent. When our sense of self depends on others getting us, any moment of misunderstanding creates psychological discomfort. To resolve it, we either try to change their view or change ourselves to match their expectations. Over time, changing ourselves becomes easier, and thus we trade authenticity for harmony. The cruelest part is that the people we most want to understand us are often the least able to do so. Not because they don't care, but because they are looking through the lens of their own fears, histories, and unfinished stories. And so the mind keeps chasing something that can never be fully caught. From here, the question becomes sharper. If the mind is wired to seek understanding, and our emotions are conditioned to crave it, how does the modern world exploit this need? That is where we now turn, into the algorithms, the echo chambers, and the subtle forms of emotional manipulation that make the desire to be understood not just a private longing, but a tool for control. If the desire to be understood has always been with us, our modern age has turned it from a quiet undercurrent into a roaring flood. Once this craving was satisfied, or left unsatisfied, by those in our immediate circle, family, friends, the local community. Now, with a single tap, we invite the gaze of hundreds, thousands, even millions, and with that gaze comes the hope and the ache of being perfectly understood. The first danger here is the illusion of comprehension that the digital age creates. Social media thrives on the appearance of intimacy. A like, a comment, a direct message, they all feel like little affirmations. They get me. But as Tristan Harris has warned, these systems are engineered not for genuine understanding, but for engagement. The goal is not to see you, but to keep you coming back for more. Social media algorithms are masterful at showing you what you already want to see. They create echo chambers where your preferences, grievances, and self-narratives are reflected back to you. This feels like understanding, but it is only reinforcement. And here is the subtle danger. You begin to believe that understanding should always feel like agreement. Disagreement then feels like betrayal. The craving for understanding grows sharper while tolerance for disagreement withers. MIT researchers found in 2018 that false information spreads 6 times faster than the truth online. not because people enjoy being deceived, but because misinformation is often emotionally satisfying, and when it confirms our worldview, it feels like validation. The platform doesn't care whether the understanding you receive is rooted in truth or illusion. It only cares that you feel it enough to stay engaged. The modern self lives in a marketplace where understanding is currency. Influencers brand themselves not only to be liked, but to be relatable. Political movements compress complex realities into slogans that can be grasped in seconds. But to be universally understood, you must flatten the edges of your truth. The more you do this, the more your identity becomes a product, easy to consume, easy to discard. Dark psychology exploits this with a technique called emotional mirroring. A manipulator will reflect your emotions, values, and even your mannerisms back to you, creating the illusion of deep understanding. In romantic relationships, this can forge an intense bond, but one built on imitation, not authenticity. In politics, it is the leader who speaks like one of us, echoing the crowd's frustrations while quietly advancing an entirely different agenda. In business, it is the brand that claims to get you through advertising, not because it understands you, but because it has mapped your buying patterns. Groups, whether online communities, activist circles, or friend networks, offer another seductive form of understanding. You adopt their language, their in-jokes, their approved narratives. You feel understood because you are fluent in their code. But groups create boundaries, and to remain understood, you must stay inside them. Step outside, and those who once mirrored you treat you as alien. The fear of that expulsion can keep you silent, even when your private thoughts diverge from the group's script. Solomon Ash's conformity experiments showed that 75% of people conformed to a group's obviously wrong answer at least once. The cost of being misunderstood by the group was greater for most than the cost of being wrong. In close relationships, the desire to be understood can create a feedback loop that actually erodes intimacy. One partner, feeling unseen, explains more and more. The other, feeling overwhelmed, withdraws. The withdrawal increases the urgency to explain, which pushes the other further away. In healthy dynamics, some misunderstandings are accepted as inevitable. Two separate minds will never align perfectly. In unhealthy dynamics, misunderstanding is treated as a failure that must be constantly corrected, leaving no space for difference. The danger is greater now because misunderstanding follows us. In earlier times, you could walk away from someone who misread you and start fresh. Now, an opinion you voiced 5 years ago, stripped of its context, can resurface at any moment. And so people grow cautious, curated, and hyper-aware of managing how they are perceived. Erich Fromm warned in Escape from Freedom that when freedom feels too heavy, people seek refuge in systems that tell them who they are. The craving to be understood can function the same way. When self-definition feels too uncertain, we let others define us, and then we fight to preserve their definition. So here is the paradox of the digital age. Technology gives us unprecedented opportunities to be seen, but the same systems that amplify our voice also train us to depend on them for our sense of self. In that dependency, we risk becoming exactly what Bonhoeffer warned against, people who no longer think independently, but echo the language that keeps them accepted. The final question is not just how do we escape this trap, but what do we replace it with? If understanding from others is an unreliable foundation, what stronger ground can we stand on? That is where we now turn, into the discipline of self-definition. If the craving to be understood is an invisible cage, then self-direction is the key that unlocks it. But this is not about declaring, "I don't care what people think," in a tone of defiance. That kind of bravado is still chained to the audience. It needs them to be watching. True self-correction is quieter and more enduring. It is the ability to stand in your own presence without flinching, even when every eye around you misreads your intentions. External understanding is like the weather, shifting, unpredictable, beyond your control. Build your sense of worth on it and you will always be at the mercy of storms. Self-correction, on the other hand, is an inner climate. It is the act of assessing your own thoughts, choices and worth without outsourcing the task to the crowd. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily in meditations, writing to himself as both witness and judge. If you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them. For him, this was not detachment for its own sake, but sovereignty over the one realm no one else could rule, his own mind. There are practices that can help break the cage. One is philosophical journaling. The Stoics, the existentialists, and even the psychoanalysts kept records of their thoughts and doubts. Journaling lets you see whether your urge to explain yourself is grounded in truth or in the fear of being misread. Before you rush to correct someone's perception, write it down and ask, am I trying to serve truth here or just my image? Another is Socratic questioning. When you feel misunderstood, interrogate the necessity of being understood in that moment. Socrates taught through relentless questioning, not to humiliate, but to strip away unexamined assumptions. Ask yourself, what evidence shows I must be understood here? What harm will truly come if I am not? Carl Jung's shadow work offers another path. Much of what we wish others to understand are the disowned parts of ourselves, the shadow. We try to smuggle them into the light through other people's recognition. Instead, confront them directly, name the traits you most wish to be seen for, and then acknowledge them yourself, without witness or applause. Then there is the deliberate practice of misunderstanding, the psychological equivalent of cold water immersion. Let small misunderstandings stand uncorrected. Let someone think you meant something you didn't, and watch the discomfort rise and then pass. Each time you survive it, the bars loosen, and finally slow the reflex to explain. In conversation, notice the moment you lean forward to justify yourself. Pause. Ask whether your clarification serves the dialogue or just your need to be clear in their eyes. Sometimes, silence is the truest expression of confidence. When you shift from needing understanding to appreciating it, your relationships transform. If someone sees you clearly, you can receive it as a gift without clinging to it, and when they don't, you no longer treat it as a threat to your existence. Nietzsche's free spirit lives comfortably with being misunderstood because they are anchored in something deeper than the crowd's perception. For them, misunderstanding is not exile, it is simply the tax one pays for owning oneself. Sartre's warning that hell is other people was not an argument for isolation, but for authenticity. If we cannot hold ourselves together without the scaffolding of others' understanding, then we are always in danger of collapse. Erich Fromm argued that the price of individuality is the willingness to bear the anxiety of freedom. Likewise, the price of self-stagnation is the willingness to bear the unease of being misunderstood, sometimes by those you love most. The 21st century rewards quick alignment with popular narratives, not the slow work of self-examination. But every time you choose to validate yourself before seeking validation from others, you commit a quiet act of rebellion against the machinery of conformity. Ask yourself daily, do I know my own reasons? Would I still hold this belief if no one else agreed? Am I living to express truth or to avoid being misread? These are not comfortable questions, but they are sharpening stones for the mind. Imagine a week in which you no longer try to manage how others see you. You speak less to be understood and more to express what is true for you. You let some misunderstandings live without correction. You turn inward for recognition and find that your own witness is enough. In that week you might feel the raw edges of vulnerability, but you will also taste the first drops of freedom, and once you have tasted that, the hunger for it grows stronger than the hunger for approval. Marcus Aurelius might call this living in accordance with nature. Jung might call it individuation. Nietzsche might call it becoming who you are. I will simply call it mastery. So here is my question to you, and it is not rhetorical. If the price of being truly yourself was that no one could ever fully understand you, would you still pay it? Because the moment you can say yes without hesitation is the moment you step out of the invisible cage. From that point on, every act of understanding you receive is not a condition for your peace. It is simply a beautiful, unnecessary gift.